Donald Trump and the media, I should say Donald Trump and the military and the media coverage of that. That's a little more clear. The military situation. Here is the truth. If you have a pen and paper, you might want to write this down so you know. On January 20th of this year, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order designating drug cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs. That list has grown throughout the year. They add various gangs, various situations to the executive order. Okay. The executive order gives the President of the United States the authority under our Constitution to use military force against threats to America, foreign terrorist organizations. That is important for everyone to understand. It is underreported. Now, after the attack on 9/11, 2001, President Bush the Younger went to Congress and got the authority to declare a war on terror. Under that authority, the American president has the lawful right to attack enemies of this country, as long as they are designated in writing. You can't just attack everybody. It's got to be there. You don't need congressional approval. You already have it. Congress already gave Bush the Younger that hat. So that has been used over the past 25 years to wipe out Al Qaeda, bin Laden, ISIS, Soleimani of Iran. And I chronicle all of this in my book, Killing the Killers. If you have not read that book, it is very important that you do so if you care about this at all. All right. Now, there has been an authorization for use of military force, okay? And that happened under President Obama. The authorization for use of military force, AUMF is the acronym. Why President Obama did that is that he made a mistake in withdrawing all U.S. forces out of Iraq, and ISIS took over. Remember that, okay? Half the country. And ISIS killed thousands of people, slaughtered them. President Obama went back in under this authority, not approved by Congress. And to his credit, and to President Trump's credit, because they both combined to do this, both of them, they wiped out ISIS. And you'll remember during that horrific campaign that air power, U.S. air power, and special forces were used. Al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, tracked down, and his 3 young children were killed. It was al-Baghdadi's fault, not our fault, but it was go in and do what you have to do. The orders for the bin Laden raid in Pakistan were everybody dies unless they immediately surrender. Any resistance, boom. And we go through that in Killing the Killers. In addition, there were campaigns before 9/11, and this is fascinating. So Bush the Elder, okay, in December of 1989, the anniversary coming up, invaded Panama. The United States invaded Panama, okay? And 21,000 U.S. troops stormed that country, kidnapped the president, Noriega, brought him to Miami. He was tried as a drug merchant. And Bush the Elder said to Congress, again, no approval of this, but he did alert Congress, said, This Noriega is a threat to the United States because he controls the Panama Canal, and there are civilians in danger in Panama. Went in, removed him. Okay, you remember that? I was covering it, and then before President Reagan invaded Grenada, the Caribbean island, because Cuban troops were there. And American medical students in Grenada were threatened, according to President Reagan. No congressional approval. Boom, 7,500 U.S. troops and shooting. In Panama, no, just went in, grabbed them. That was it, government change. Panama, it was some shooting back and forth. Okay, that was Operation Urgent Fury. So you can see that there is a long history, which is very important to understand, about U.S. military action not getting congressional approval and not obeying the rules of war. Because when you go after a terrorist group like ISIS, we blew the hell out of them. Okay, there was no Geneva Convention. There are no ISIS prisoners I know of. They're dead. Not justifying, reporting. I don't know if you could have done it another way. I don't know another way. So now we have Maduro in Venezuela. He's Noriega. Now, President Trump actually told Maduro, we won't arrest you, but you got to get out of Venezuela. You got to leave. You can take your family, some money. Cuba will take you. Brazil will take you. It's not the same thing. But Maduro said no. So Maduro, he's on the clock. That guy's not going to survive this. Whether he's dead or captured, I don't know. I don't think Trump's going to send ground troops in. I don't think so. That's too messy. But certainly air power. And we know that the flotilla of warships is now in the Caribbean, U.S. warships. So it's a very complicated situation. I do expect, with these drug boats being blown out of the Caribbean and the Pacific, and the latest controversy is with two guys that weren't killed, and then the U.S. forces went back and dropped another bomb on the boat, and they were killed. And the Democratic Party and some Republicans, I wouldn't say a lot, but some, are saying, no, this is against Geneva Convention, whatever it may be. It's not the Geneva Convention. It's a totally different thing. Okay, this is a terror designation. It's a whole different thing than a declared war. And that's the memo.
Bill, thank you again for having me here. You did offer me an opportunity to rebut some of your facts, and I would very much appreciate you holding up that end of the bargain, because I do have some argument here. You mentioned the designated terrorist organization, or the foreign terrorist organization designation. That, unfortunately, does not actually provide any legal authority to use military force against any target. It has very specific, limited applicability. It allows us to do certain things administratively, freeze bank accounts, conduct various investigations, but foreign terrorist organization designation provides no legal authority whatsoever to use military force against them. I just want to make sure that's very, very clear.
Stop you there. If that is true, and that is not what President Trump believes, and you know
right.
Not what he believes. If what you're saying is right, why hasn't this been litigated? It hasn't been litigated. There have been no lawsuits. It's not being held by the Supreme Court. And Congress has not proposed any bills at all to limit not only President Trump, but President Biden before him, President Obama before him, President Bush the younger. That litigation does not exist. So if what you're saying is true, why does it not exist?
Well, there are lots of reasons why litigation doesn't happen, or doesn't happen right away. One, Congress doesn't have all the facts yet because they've not done thorough investigations.
No, but it's been going on for 25 years now.
Well, no. So here's another point I want to contrast, is that it's a bit of a false analogy to say, well, we've been doing strikes on terrorists before. Yes, we have. The
Right.
difference, though, and it's a critical difference between then and now, whether it was under Trump 1 or Bush or Obama or Biden, the difference was we had both domestic legal authority under an AUMF, and I'll get back to that in a second because I know you're going to go there, a domestic authorization for use of military force, and arguably a basis in international law under self-defense. That applied to those facts.
Again, let me stop you here. International law does not trump, pardon the pun, executive orders by a president of the United States. It just
actually it does. No, actually it does, Bill, because
not unless there's a declared war. Look, we got to get specific. I want to get out of the world of theory. Remember,
it's not the world of theory, Bill. The Supreme Court has said
but
international
law. You remember because you were deployed in Iraq, that during his first term, Donald Trump dropped a drone on Soleimani, a citizen of Iran, in Baghdad, killed him right outside the airport, okay? There was not one piece of litigation put forth by anyone, domestically or internationally, that challenged that assassination.
That doesn't mean it's lawful, Bill, and you know that. It doesn't mean it's lawful.
Okay, I mean, but now we're going into the world of theory, Colonel.
No. It's not the world of theory, Bill, because the Supreme Court has said international law does apply, and for two reasons. One, international law, the Geneva Conventions that you've talked about, are a treaty that we have ratified. Because we've ratified it, it becomes part of the supreme law of the land, which is part of the law of the land that the president is obligated under Article 2 to follow with fidelity. That is part of the law. The Supreme Court has said you can't just exercise. I'm sorry?
We're not fighting a war. It's an executive action against terrorism. When Trump bombed Iran, okay, took out their nuclear facilities, we didn't get a declaration of war to do that. He did it under a terrorist EO saying this nation is a danger to our nation and I have to act. Again, no litigation whatsoever, not from The Hague, not from anybody in the United States. So I don't know. Everybody's not obeying the law. Everybody's a scofflaw.
So you bring up lots of precedent, and it's not an invalid argument to make that we've done things before and there was no rejoinder, there was no lawsuit, there was no investigation. That's a fair argument to make. I'll concede that. But that doesn't mean that it is lawful. It doesn't mean it is constitutional. It doesn't mean you can keep doing it.
There's the real world and then there's the theoretical world. And I don't argue theory here. If somebody, and nobody has, Colonel, you're a lawyer, you could file a lawsuit against the Department of War, Department of Defense, whatever you want to call it, saying it's illegal for them to blow these drug boats out of the water, okay? It will go to the Supreme Court. They'll have to rule on it. I wouldn't mind seeing that, by the way.
I don't have standing to bring a lawsuit in federal court against President Trump for deciding to use force. I just don't. And that's just not how it works. You mentioned the White House being...
You could do it. You could do it. You absolutely could do it. In fact, there's a lawsuit now in the motion, and we're going to report on it tomorrow because we have to do some investigating. One of the families of one of the dope merchants who got blown up has retained an American lawyer to do just that.
Sure. Yeah, representing a victim is different from suing the government for an action that we believe the president doesn't have the authority to take. Two different kinds of lawsuits.
Action. You can do a class action suit against them. You know that. Come on, you're a law professor. But nobody does it because you're going to lose. Because the precedent, it's precedent after precedent after precedent. You know, the invasion of Grenada, the invasion of Panama, Maduro and...
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the invasion of Panama and Grenada and Grenada. Let's talk about those two. The legal justification for those two were threats to U.S. citizens, whether that was
Right.
exaggerated or not.
And
Okay.
that's a legal
But they were
justification for the drug gangs. Drug gangs,
wrong.
smugglers have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. We just
Well,
documented.
so have guns. So have guns. So for us to say, I think it's a false analogy, Bill, a false analogy to say that these drug runners, I am not defending drug runners. Drug runners are criminals. They're heinous. They're terrible. They're violent. I agree, 100%. But they're criminals. And do they do bad things? Yes. But let's think about what they're doing. The drug runners in the Caribbean are sending cocaine. No, they're sending cocaine.
Threats to national security?
They're a threat to safety and public health, but they're not trying to kill Americans. Why would they kill their own customer base? Why would they try to kill their own customer base? They want U.S. citizens to live so that they buy their drugs.
But more people die from the actions of a drug cartel than any jihadist organization by far. So Trump has said they're a threat to national security because they're killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. You're saying that's not true?
I'm saying drugs do have a negative effect, but drug runners, drug cartels, while they're involved in getting the drugs there, this is not splitting legal hairs. This is the difference between crime and war. There's a difference, okay? Drug runners are you call it invasion or whatever, but they're putting drugs on U.S. soil. They're getting into the hands of people who shouldn't have them. Kids, got it. It's terrible. But let's think about all the things that have to happen. These drugs are not being injected into people against their will. They're consumers. They're buying it.
Look, these are organized cartels under the protection of a Maduro, the guy in Colombia, in Mexico, Obrador protected them. Okay, so it's got to be a national security. It has to be. All right, I got to wrap it up.
Here's what you do. Here's what you do. Here's what you do. If you believe, and not just you, Bill, but if anyone believes, including President Trump, believes that Maduro is the heart of this, the brain of this, the central actor in all this.
He's a facilitator, just like Noriega. It's the same thing.
If that is the case, then you tie these groups to him, and you say to Congress, I want an AUMF to go after Maduro. Here's my
look. If it were me, I would run it by Congress. I would, because
that's the right thing to do.
To have that power, all right. But you don't have to. Under what Bush the Younger did way back.
Those were different cases involving direct lethal threats. Planes flying into the Pentagon, into the World Trade Center. Direct lethal attacks on civilians. That is not the same thing as drugs being transported. It's just not the same.
Great debate. You should show it to your students. And we'll get a lot of mail, and I'll read all the mail tomorrow. And we really appreciate it, Colonel. And we appreciate your patriotism very much. 2 tours in Iraq. I mean, that tells me a lot. So thank you for helping us out tonight.